Hi everyone, so in this video I'm going to talk to you about what it's really like to go through a personal injury claim. Now this is based on my experience back in 2010, so yeah, it was quite a while ago now, but I'm going to tell you what happened when I was involved in quite a bad car crash, how I was injured and how I got money from it, how much I got. I want to show you that it's not quite as simple as people think, and you'll learn quite a bit from this video about insurance and maybe even about doctors, because I had a very strange experience with a doctor. Anyway, let's get into it. So what happened was, this was back in January, I think 2010, just from memory, it was quite a long time ago. I was doing a driving lesson and me and the people were sitting at the end of the road and we didn't move at all, we were just sitting dead still and we heard this massive bang, and I looked in the mirror and the car behind had gone straight into us and we hadn't even moved, and I thought that's weird. So I got out to see what was going on. The car behind them had gone into them and the car behind them had gone into them. Don't ask me how that happened. How? I still haven't worked it out nearly 10 years later. How on earth did we're at the front, car goes into us, car goes into them, car goes into them, a 4-car pile up, and we didn't even move? How did that happen? That's a mystery, but it did happen. So anyway, I got out of the car and I remember this because the people was quite upset. She was crying in the car because she thought it was her fault. And I said, look, you haven't done anything, we haven't even moved. And what happened was one of the weirdest things. It started off a chain of events that went on for about 2 years. This man behind us was in this Audi, and it was like a souped up Audi. He had Le Mans stickers all over the car, and he had turbo stickers all over it. But the thing is, this guy was about 60 years old, and he seemed to me to be like a boy racer who'd never grown up. He was like, his music was thumping, and he had all these turbo signs and spoilers. And I remember it was a 2.7 turbocharged Audi, because I looked on the back and it said 2.7 turbo. And anyway, he was going mad at me, saying, why didn't you go? It's your fault. You should have gone. It's not our fault, because we were sitting still. He just drove into us. And it wasn't until now I realised, or he told me, he said to me, they've gone into the back of me. And I went to the next car up and they said, oi, they've gone in the back of us. And there we were, and this was on a busy city centre road in Birmingham. 4 cars all smashed into each other. And I soon realised what was happening. I can't prove this, but I think that those 3 other cars were racing each other because they were all what you would call boy racers. You're not supposed to use that term, but they were all, apart from this man who was quite older, he was like 60 something. They were all about young 20s, late teens, early 20s, music thumping, all cars with blacked out windows, spoilers. And I reckon they'd been racing each other. And I reckon the first one went to go, thinking we'd gone, and all the others just ploughed into them. Anyway, what happened was, they all got together and started talking among each other. And they were all, because I was standing right next to them, and they all said, let's blame him. And I said, yeah, it's his fault. They're the learner. They'll get the blame because they're a learner. They don't know what they're doing. And this one bloke said, you know what? I think his car was damaged already. And they all started saying, yeah, that dent was already on the back because I had a massive dent in the back of my car. One of them, who pretended to be some kind of car expert, went up to my bumper. And listen, if you know about cars, you'll get this. You'll work this one out. He went up to my bumper and started saying that it was rusted. Now, bumpers are made of plastic, which doesn't rust. And he was saying that it wasn't a dent, it was rust. There's no way a 9-month-old car is going to have rust on it. And what they didn't know, because they all said, oh, we're going to say that damage was already there. And they started making his story up about, yeah, we'll just pretend it was already damaged. What they didn't know is only a few days earlier, my car had been in the main garage for a service. And they take pictures of it, they take video of it, they write a report. And that car was not damaged days ago when it went to a garage. But I didn't say anything about that. Now this went on for about 20-25 minutes. And yes, we were blocking the road, but we couldn't move because it was such a mess. I had people arguing. And it was 6:30 on a Monday night. Remember that, it was in January. Remember, 6:30 in January. That will come into the story soon. And I will get on to the personal injury bit. It's just important you understand all the hassle I went through. After about 20-25 minutes, a bus pulled up. And this woman got off the bus and started screaming. Now, I'm not going to try and do a scream because I can't scream, but she was all wailing and screaming, and then she fell down on the floor, clutching her leg. And we all looked at her, and she said, "You hit me. I was walking past and you hit me and I'm injured. I will need to claim." And what was funny though, even though all of us had been arguing amongst ourselves, we all united. You know what it said about, you all unite against the common enemy. And one bloke said in not such a nice way as I'll say it, he told her to get up and walk away. Otherwise, he'd do something quite nasty to her. And she just got up and ran off. What an idiot. She was trying to make money out of this just by pretending she'd been hit. And the bus was pulling up 25 minutes after the crash has happened. And this was a nightmare. My head was thumping because I had all these people. I think there was 3 in the one car, 1 in the other. There must have been about 6 or 7 people all shouting at me. And what was quite funny is when I started explaining things about if you hit the back of someone, it's your fault. This is quite funny. They was all lined up in a line, one after another. And it was like I was some headmaster and I was giving them a lecture. And they all looked like naughty schoolboys kind of looking down at the feet like this. And when they started to realise what had happened, and I'm not an idiot and I do know what I'm talking about, that's when we all left the scene because we swapped details, we got each other's numbers and whatever. And I said to the people, we're going to leave the scene before this gets nasty. And this was, by the way, if I haven't already said this, this was the crash that got me to get dash cams. This is why I got cameras. People ask, why do you have cameras in your car? This crash is what caused me to do that because of all this rubbish that we're talking about. Anyway, so I went home, went to bed. I was living in this flat, I remember at the time. I woke up the next morning and I couldn't get up. I was just completely stiff and I tried to get out of bed and I couldn't move. It was like my neck was just completely stiff. And at first I started laughing. I thought, I can't believe this. I can't get out of bed. And I was walking like this, like Robocop. I was so stiff and rigid and my neck had completely gone. I couldn't move, Mark. If I went like that, it was, ow, it really hurt. And I thought, is this whiplash? Because I didn't feel bad at the time. And I phoned my insurers. I think they were closed because it was a Tuesday if they were open. Whenever I have crashes, it tends to be on a Friday. The insurers are always closed. Anyway, I phoned up the insurers and told them, I said, look, my neck's feeling really stiff. And I said, it may be whiplash. And it got worse over the coming days. And I just couldn't work. I was so, just rigid. I couldn't move my head. I was like that. I just couldn't move my head at all. It was so painful. So anyway, I'll cut the story a bit short because it can go on for a long, long time. But quite simply what happened is this other guy who crashed into me was completely denying any blame. He said it wasn't his fault. And some of the excuses he came up with were so funny. Now remember I said it was 6:30 on 6:30 in the evening in January. Think of what the weather and the light conditions will be like at 6:30 in January. And he said the reason he'd hit us was because the sun was shining off my roof sign and had bounced off and dazzled him and he'd driven into us because my roof sign was at fault. It was 6:30 in January. It was pitch black. When we told him that, because this all went through solicitors, he said, oh, sorry, I didn't mean the sun. I meant the moon. So he was trying to say that the moon had bounced off my car head sign, the learner driver sign on the roof, and the moon had bounced off and dazzled him, and that's why it hit me, and it was my fault because he'd driven into me because the moon was blinding him. Of course it was a load of rubbish, and this went on for months. Anyway, I'm going to get to the part now where I talk about my injury claim and what happened when I went to see the doctor. And what happened with the doctor really shocked me. I went into the doctor's room, and this was about, when was it? This was about 6 months after the crash. Now this is one thing you can learn about personal injury claims, and I found this bizarre. They will only assess you after all the injuries have gone. Yeah, so if you're injured, they won't see you. You have to wait until all the injuries have gone, then you go and see a doctor. And that made no sense to me at all. And I remember saying to the insurers, why? Why have I got to wait till it's all gone, then go and see a doctor? That seems completely backwards to me. Surely I've got to see the doctor when I'm injured to prove I'm injured. And they said it's because you can only claim for the injuries you've got when you see the doctor. So you've got to wait, make sure you know others develop, and then you go and see a doctor. Now at this point I was thinking, well, no wonder so many people scam these injuries. You don't even have to really prove you're injured. But what happened is, I went into the doctor's room, and this is something I'll never forget. There was a doctor sitting at a desk, and I'd say he was about mid-50s to mid-60s. He was quite an elderly doctor, obviously very experienced. He'd been doing the job for decades probably. And I sat down, and he said to me, before I could even say hello, he said, right, here's the situation. You've been in a car crash, and you just want to make some money from pretending you're injured. I'm going to pretend that I'm not a doctor who's got years of experience. I'm going to be a complete idiot, and I'm going to nod and agree with everything you say. I'm going to sign a form, and you're going to get your money. If you try and scam it, and you try and go over the top and make out you're more injured than I can tell you are, you're not going to get a penny. Do we understand each other? And I said, what? I said, I was injured. And he said, yeah, that's what they all say. I was injured. I am really injured. And he said, yeah. And he said, oh, go on then, start your routine. All my neck's hurting, all my back's hurting. And I thought, this doctor's a joke. Now I'm sure there must be some kind of guidelines in the medical profession that you can't treat a patient like that. This guy was just crazy. He was just saying that I was a scammer and that I wasn't injured. And he hadn't even looked at me, hadn't even assessed me or anything. And I thought, this guy's completely crazy. And I remember one thing he said to me was, he said, the only thing I'll tell you straight away is I can tell you work in a car because your shoulders aren't quite fully back like that. And he said, I can tell you sit in a car like this all the time. And he said, if you're not careful, when you get older, you'll be one of these old people and your face will be looking down at the floor like that. And he was walking around like this. He says, you'll be like this when you're older if you're not careful. And I thought, this doctor's crazy. And anyway, he just signed the forms. He said, yeah, there you go, get your money. Thanks, bye. And I thought, what a strange doctor. He's like Dr. Strange. I mean, you can't just tell a patient that they're scamming you when you haven't even inspected them or anything. What a complete joke that was. Anyway, I'll get on with it because I know you're getting a bit bored. It's been quite a long video for what it is. Anyway, I eventually got the money. How much did I get? And it took, by the way, about 8 months for my neck to fully get better. It took a long time. Like when I turned it, it was painful for quite a while. It did eventually go. The payout I got, if I remember, was at 1,200 and something. It was about £1,200. And if you think, oh, well, that's a lot of money, bear in mind, I'd been off work. I'd only been doing half my normal hours a week for about, 6-7 months. I can't remember, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever it was that it hurt. I can't remember, but it was quite a long time. I had to cut my hours down, and it barely even covered the lessons that I'd lost. I couldn't claim for lost income at the time because I didn't have an accountant. I have got an accountant now, but you have to have an accountant to be able to claim lost income. And I didn't have an accountant, so I couldn't just claim lost income on top of that. But yeah, that's what happened. But that's not the end of the story, because the year after, when my car insurance came round, it was fine. It was quite a low price. I thought, fair enough. It had gone up slightly, but not much. It was just a normal inflation that it had gone up by. The year after that, which is now 2 years after the crash, my insurance had rocketed right up. And I phoned them and I said, why has it gone up so much? And guess what had happened? Yep, that man who was refusing to accept any blame was still refusing to accept blame. So what they'd done is, when you have a crash, you have to pay normally about £250, what you call excess. So if you have a crash that's your fault, you pay £250 or whatever you've agreed to. It's normally about 200, 250, and then the insurers pay the rest. This man was refusing to accept any blame, and he said, I'm not paying my excess. So they had to charge it to me while they took him through court to get the money off him. And the police had told him it was his fault. His insurers had told him it was his fault. Everyone told him it was his fault. And it came to the point where my solicitor said to his, look, you pay the money now or you'll go to court. You'll lose it instantly because you've got no chance, and you'll pay thousands of pounds more in court costs and fines and all sorts. And he paid. But even when he paid, he wrote a note saying that he was paying begrudgingly and he didn't accept any blame for the crash because it was my fault. What an idiot. He just wouldn't accept it was his fault at all. So there you go. That's my story of one of the worst crashes I've ever been in. If ever you wonder why I've got dash cams in my car, I could have solved all this within minutes. I would have said, there's the footage, done. None of this messing about this woman who was pretending to be injured. and all the rubbish about these people getting together, I would have recorded them saying, we're going to pretend it's his fault. So just so you know, if you are thinking of making a personal injury claim, it's not quite as simple as you might think. It takes a long time. They have now restricted it a lot since that happened to me. So I hope you've learned something from this video. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you again soon for more videos.